This is another one of those very potent mini PCs that are proving to be a bit of a handful for manufacturers, because the Ryzen 9 that's in this, the 7940HS, has 8 cores, it's got 16 threads, and it turbos up to 5.2 gigahertz. It has the Radeon 780M graphics. All good, but that's 45 watts that it's currently configured to. That's a lot of power that such a small little chassis here has to deal with. So will we run into issues? Let's find out. But just before I do, my model here that they sent out to me has 32 gigabytes of RAM. It's 5600 megahertz, the speed of it, dual channel of course, and it's got a terabyte SSD and Wi-Fi 6E. So in the box we do get this, which is a mounting bracket. So yes, you can VESA mount this onto the back of a monitor if you wanted to. The screws are there. Power supply cable, the power supply, which is 120 watts, Hunt key, that's a known brand, a warranty card, and finally an HDMI cable. This model here is made out of metal around the outside. So this is an alloy with a matte finish to it. And then we have plastic on the top, plastic on the bottom. The main intake here for the fresh, cool air comes, or will come from here, that's going to be sucked in. And then you'll see on the left and the right here, there are some more vents. There's also the VESA mounting point here and our ports. So we've got two USB 3.2s, Gen 2, reset, Type-C. Now this is full spec one. Well, apart from it doesn't have power delivery, but it does have video out. That's up to 8K 30, 4K 120 Hz. I've tested out. That is working, and 40 gigabits per second transfers. Excellent. Then a 3.5mm with mic support, power on with status LED. Along the back here, you will find a gigabit LAN. Our exit vent here, so that's where all the hot air is pushed out the back. I'll give you a sample of the fan noise later on, and I'll cover the thermals too, of course. Two HDMI 2.0s. Unfortunately, they're not HDMI 2.1, so they kind of cheaped out on those two there, but at least we've got their Type-C on the front. The third now, USB 3.2 Gen 2, and then a lonely USB 2.0, and this, of course, is power in. Now, to upgrade it, it's very easy. I thought I had to remove the bottom panel here. Turns out I was wrong. You simply just need to lift off the top cover, and that gives us then access to all the stuff you want to upgrade. So we have our SSD right here, 1 terabyte PCIe 4.0, and then our 2 slots SODIMM DDR5, and this is crucial RAM that they've given us, which is great. This RAM is 5600 megahertz, and if you want to swap out the Wi-Fi card, this is Wi-Fi 6E from MediaTek. Well, it's right here. You're able to upgrade that. So in terms of upgradability, it's good. It's what you normally typically see out of a mini PC. Wi-Fi card, SSD, and RAM, and it's very easy to do this, to upgrade, because you just have to remove that lid. Here is our BIOS, so it's locked down, unfortunately, to us. Now, there are some brands out there that just give us all the options you can think of, but when you go into graphics configuration, for example, it's just the frame buffer size that we can adjust. CPU configuration, basically nothing useful, and that's it. Really, that's it. Security, and you've got then just your boot order you can change. Now, you've got auto power on, at least this option is here. So that's one thing we can change. So if you're going to run it on a switch or as a server, you want to set that to on, of course. And power mode select, well, default's balanced. You can put that onto performance there. Now that is going to boost up the fan noise. The default is balanced, so that's what I'm going to go with now with all of my testing. Here we are on Windows with our K4. So as I mentioned at the start, we've got the Ryzen 9. It's the 7940HS with that very potent 4 integrated graphics, that is 780M. Now you see here that free available RAM that we've got about 28.7 usable. That's because some of it's dedicated to the integrated graphics just to help boost up that performance. We have Windows 11 Pro, and I've got some good news here looking at the device manager under our network adapters. You can see that it is 2.5 gigabit, the LAN adapter, not just 1 gigabit. So that's great. And then it's the MediaTek. So that's the Wi-Fi 6E. Signal strength has been very good, I think, because it's positioned on the lid. There's the plastic there, so nothing's inhibiting the signal. So that's why it seems to work really well for me. Good transfer speeds, no issues. Other things of interest possibly to you is the drive. So it's a Lexar, this SSD, 1 terabyte. And the speeds, they're good, but this is not PCIe for me, 4.0 territory. So if you want faster, put something like a 980 Pro in there from Samsung, and that will definitely speed things up. It'll be almost double the reads and write sequentials. It's okay. It's still, like about PCIe 3.0 speeds. So still pretty quick, very fast. No real complaints about that. So you'll see that we do have our APU, so the Ryzen 9 here listed 16 times because it's got 16 threads, 8 cores, maximum turbo is 5.2. So it's potent. But how does it fare in some of those synthetic benchmarks that push this particular chipset really hard? Well, a little bit disappointing. You can see here the multi-core score, 13,000, don't get me wrong, that's good. And so it's a single core score. But this chipset can do better. In fact, a lot better. And why it didn't fare as best as it could or didn't do as good of job, well, it's because we ran into this. We ran into some thermal throttling. Some severe thermal throttling too, mind you, because look at this, 102.5 degrees. That's what it hit. In fact, it triggered a T-junction max kind of event that it put itself into sleep. So it's overheating. It's getting just too hot. There's thermal throttling. Well, it claims no thermal throttling is happening, but it's getting way too hot. You touch the metal outer case of this and the K4, boy, does it get hot. It gets up to about 56 degrees Celsius I measured, and that's really scorching hot when you touch it. So the thermals, the cooling in it, not really up to the job if you start to just push these kind of synthetic benchmarks. Cinebench doesn't really handle it. Other benchmarks, I didn't want to go overboard with them. So here we have Night Raid. And you see the graphics score here, that's very good. This is, one of the best integrated graphics that I have seen. I think I got 31,000 one time. That was with another 780M. So it's a very quick integrated graphics chip there, with the graphics, that they're using with this APU. And then our synthetic score here again, benchmark, this Geekbench 6 now. Very good single core score, and then the multi-core score, good, but yeah, I have seen Intel's chips do a lot better. I've seen around 16,000 points here. That's with something like the 1390 50 HK from Intel with more cores. So that's kind of normal, the multi-core score, but very fast, very quick single core score there too. Good performance because that's a short burst. It's not long, like the 10 minutes with stress test that we have here with Cinebench R23. So that's what ended up causing the throttling running that. Now, when you're doing that, I'll run the test again just to show you what it's like, the fan noise, because it gets a little loud. This will just give you an idea of how loud it really gets. General performance of this mini PC is very good. So the start menu, multitasking, everything loads up very fast, blazing quick. What about video decoding? So 4K HEVC 10-bit. This opens up and there's no stutter. There's no issues whatsoever. Now with the Iris Xe graphics, even with the 13th gen, it drops frames in the start. It's a little choppy, but not here. The Radeon 780M handles it flawlessly. A 4K 60 frames per second file, also very demanding. No problems. There is no drop frames that I can detect or see. It seems to be playing absolutely flawlessly here. Really good to see. So anything you throw at it, video files, demanding ones, VP9, HEVC, 10-bit, 4K, all going to run flawless very well on this particular spec of mini PC. This mini PC, thanks to that Ryzen 9 7940HS, can edit video with ease, 4K, if it's basic, smaller kind of edits. Now, my source files here, they are 4K 100 megabit, and it has no problems playing this back with no drop frames using a quarter playback, okay? So if you use full, you may occasionally see some stutters, and if you have very large video files that you're editing, you're layering them, you're color grading, you have transitions, all of that fancy stuff, then you probably need a dedicated GPU. So what I'll do now is export a minute of footage to the YouTube using the YouTube preset, and we'll see how long that is going to take. And this is the result I got. So you can see from 1 minute of footage took 27 seconds. It was in fact 26 seconds. And all of the work was being done by the CPU side of things. So the Radeon 780M sadly didn't really do much at all, but very good speeds here. They won't beat the Intel's 13th gen because the fact that it doesn't use QuickSync. It does favor it Adobe Premiere Pro. All right, so on to gaming, and probably the part you were most interested in. I know I would be most interested in this. This is Cyberpunk 2077, and I've set it to HD, and it's on the lowest preset. Now, this has more NPCs, more going on than the console versions of this game, like, for example, PlayStation 4 version. And it's running around 50 frames per second, dipping down yet in some areas to kind of late 40s there, which is still all right, and then up to 60 frames per second. So this performance in a very dense city with a lot going on is good. This is really good for integrated graphics. Okay, when you get into firefights, the frame rate will drop off a little bit. You start randomly blasting things. But overall, I think this is excellent. You cannot really get any better than this when it comes to integrated graphics. Now you notice that the GPU is not turboing it at the 2.5 gigahertz max all the time. It seems to fluctuate quite a bit, and that's to do with power limits and possibly thermals too. GTA 5 now, this is 1080p, the normal settings for everything apart from the view distance and pedestrian density, those settings right there, but it's looking good. So you get around up to, I've seen 85 frames per second. At the moment it's 60, and it should be around 80 when I get out of the car here. Well, close to that. There we go, 80 frames per second almost. So it's looking like other 780M mini PCs I've reviewed, similar kind of performance here. And you notice it's holding higher clocks here too, of about 2.5 gigahertz on the 780M. So great performance for light gaming, older titles at 1080p. And very quickly, yes, Linux, this is Manjaro, tested it out. It is working. You can get the wireless to work. I use the open source drivers for this. Now, unfortunately, this is another one of those mini PCs with the Ryzen 9 7000 series plagued with issues, because the other models I've covered, they're either randomly rebooting, powering off on me, or just simply too hot. And this is simply too hot. So you can see it's very small, the package. The cooling's not up to the job. If you intend to push it really hard and use all of that power that it has on tap, then eventually you're going to run into problems. So the CPU cores reached 200, sorry, not 200, it would have mounted 102 degrees Celsius, getting very hot. The SSD got up to 90 degrees Celsius. The RAM temperatures were also going right up. So eventually it would have run into some problem where it would have powered itself off. The outer frame, being metal, is dissipating some of the heat, but I was very surprised to almost burn myself touching it after using this mini PC for a couple of hours and gaming and pushing it quite hard. So the gaming performance, yes, it was good. And when you game, the temperatures will not be 102 degrees Celsius. They will be around the late 90s. Eventually they do start to creep up. The fan struggles. You do hear the fan noise. And yeah, it's just so unfortunate because it's got a lot of power there and a lot of potential. So the HDMI ports, both of them are only HDMI 2.0, unfortunately. So they're just 4K 60, but we have the USB 4 port at the front, which can run video out 4K 120 Hertz, 4K 60, and even 8K 30, but it doesn't support power delivery. So don't plug in any power into that Type-C port, or you could run into trouble. I'm not saying you will, but I wouldn't risk it because you could end up frying something, which has happened to be me before in the past. So Wi-Fi 6E, that is good. The RAM speeds are good. They check out. It's in dual channel, of course. And the SSD speeds, well, not really amazing. There's no room for an extra SSD, unfortunately, or a 2.5-inch drive. And I love the fact that I can just pull that lid off and I've got access to the RAM, the Wi-Fi card, and the SSD, making upgrades very easy for a mini PC. It's just those thermals. I hope that GMKTech can do something about that to maybe just change the design or tweak it a bit so it's not gonna get so hot. It's running only a 45 watt power limit. It probably has to run 35 watts, I would think, to cure these issues that it does have. And then you're missing out on the real reason why you're probably buying this is for that performance if it's going to be limited by a power limit. So thanks a lot for watching my review here of the GMKTech K4.